She said, either you step up and start covering everything like a real partner, or we need to rethink this relationship. She said it flat, not angry, like she'd already rehearsed it. We were sitting at the kitchen table, my laptop open, with our joint budget on the screen. It wasn't a fight. It was a decision she'd made without me. We'd been living together for 3 years and had shared finances for most of that time. Same checking account for rent and bills, separate personal accounts, or at least that's what we agreed to. I made a little more than her, so I already covered a bigger share. That part never bothered me. What bothered me was how confident she sounded, telling me it wasn't enough anymore. She slid her phone across the table and pointed at a list she'd typed up. Increased grocery budget, upgraded internet, a new car payment. She wanted me to take the lead and move all the major expenses onto my income so she could breathe. I asked what changed. She shrugged and said she was tired of feeling stressed about money and that couples who were serious didn't nickel and dime each other. Then she added that if I hesitated, it said a lot about my priorities. That's when I noticed she kept glancing at her phone like she was waiting for something. I asked her to open her banking app. She laughed at first and said I was being dramatic. Then she said she didn't see how that was relevant. Then she went quiet. After a long pause, she admitted she'd been using a credit card I didn't know about. Actually, 2 of them. She said it fast, like if she got it out quickly, it wouldn't sound as bad. It wasn't just random purchases. There were monthly payments I'd never seen. A personal loan, a balance transfer, late fees. I asked how much. She told me a number that made my stomach tighten. It wasn't catastrophic, but it wasn't small either. And it wasn't recent. This had been building for over a year. I asked why she never mentioned it. She said she didn't want to stress me out and that she thought she could handle it herself until work picked up. Then she said something that stuck with me. Well, now that we're building a life together, it kind of becomes our problem anyway. That's when the ultimatum made sense. She wasn't asking me to step up. She was repositioning the problem. I asked what the debt was from. She listed things loosely. Clothes, trips with friends, some home stuff, a few emergencies. She said none of it was reckless, just life. I pulled the statements and saw charges from bars I'd never been to, weekends she told me she was visiting her sister, and a few payments labeled with a guy's name I recognized from her office. When I asked about that, she waved it off, said it was nothing weird, just splitting costs for a work trip, said I was reading too much into it. I didn't accuse her of cheating. I didn't raise my voice. I just asked why someone else was floating her expenses while she was asking me to take over ours. She rolled her eyes and said this was exactly why she hadn't told me, that I always turned things into interrogations, that she needed support, not suspicion. Then she repeated the ultimatum, slower this time. If you can't do this, I need to know now. I realized we weren't talking about money anymore. We were talking about control and insulation. She wanted security without transparency, authority without accountability. I asked if she planned to stop using the cards. She said maybe, once things stabilized. I asked if she'd share access so we could plan. She said that felt invasive. I asked if she'd be okay if I hid something like this from her. She didn't answer. Instead, she said she didn't want to waste her time with someone who was scared of commitment. She said couples our age didn't keep score. She said I was acting like a roommate, not a partner. That night, she went to bed early and left me at the table with the numbers still open on my screen. I didn't sleep. I kept replaying the order of things. The secrecy, the timing, the sudden demand framed as maturity. The way her problem became a test of my loyalty. By morning, the answer was clear. Update 1. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. She made coffee, asked if I wanted eggs, talked about her schedule. No mention of the numbers, the cards, or the ultimatum. I told her we needed to finish the conversation. She sighed and said she didn't want to start the day with negativity. Then she said she'd already explained herself and didn't know what else I wanted. I told her I wasn't taking over the bills. She looked genuinely surprised, like that option hadn't existed in her head. Then her tone changed. She said I was overreacting, that everyone had some debt, and that mine wasn't zero either. I reminded her I'd told her about mine before we ever moved in together. I showed her the old emails where I'd sent statements, numbers, timelines. She waved it off and said that was different. How? I asked. She said because she'd been planning to handle hers. She just needed time. and help and trust. I asked why trust only worked one way. She said I was fixating on details instead of the bigger picture, that relationships weren't spreadsheets, that if I really loved her, I wouldn't be calculating risk like this. I told her love didn't mean blind coverage. That's when she doubled down. She said she needed a partner who could provide stability. She said she didn't feel safe with someone who hesitated. She said she wasn't asking for charity, just leadership. Then she added that her coworker had helped her before, without making it weird. That stopped me. I asked what she meant. She hesitated, then said he'd covered a few things when she was short, and that she paid him back later. She said it like it was normal, like it was proof that mature adults didn't make a big deal out of it. I asked if he knew about the debt. She said yes. I asked if he knew about the ultimatum. She didn't answer. Instead, she said I was being insecure and that my reaction was pushing her away. She said I was turning a manageable situation into a crisis. That's when I realized there was no version of this where accountability showed up later. The secrecy wasn't a mistake. It was a strategy. I told her I was separating our finances. She laughed and said I couldn't just do that. Rent was due in 2 weeks. Bills were auto-drafted. Things were set up. I told her I already changed the passwords on the joint account and moved my paycheck to my personal one. I told her I'd cover my half of rent and utilities directly, but nothing else. No buffers, no upgrades, no absorption of her debt. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. She said that was extreme. She said I was punishing her. She said I was abandoning her when she needed me. I told her I was refusing responsibility for choices I wasn't allowed to know about. She accused me of trying to control her with money. I pointed out that control was giving ultimatums tied to hidden liabilities. She packed a bag and left for the night. By the end of the week, the first consequence showed up without me doing anything. A payment she'd been making from the joint account bounced. Then another one. She asked me if something was wrong with the bank. I told her nothing was wrong on my end. She didn't respond for hours after that. When she finally did, it wasn't to talk. It was to ask if I could spot her until things smoothed out. I didn't answer. Final update. I didn't respond to her message asking me to spot her, not because I was trying to teach a lesson, but because there was nothing left to discuss. I'd already said what I would and wouldn't do, and anything after that would have been negotiation by guilt. She came back to the apartment 2 days later like we were just picking up where we left off. She was calmer, almost careful. She said she'd been thinking and admitted maybe she should have told me sooner. Not apologized, just acknowledged timing. She asked if we could reset and revisit things once she caught up a little. I told her the reset already happened. I'd reset my boundaries. That's when the pressure started showing up in places I wasn't involved in. Her credit card company called the apartment phone while I was home. I didn't answer. A week later, a second one did. Then letters started coming, thick ones. She stacked them in a drawer and pretended they weren't there. Her mood shifted fast. She stopped upgrading groceries. The delivery apps disappeared from her phone. She started asking what nights I wouldn't be home, not for emotional reasons, but so she could plan rides. She didn't ask me for money again directly. Instead, she talked out loud about how unfair things were, how partners were supposed to help each other, how she'd never do this to someone she loved. At work, things changed too. I heard about it accidentally when I ran into one of her coworkers at a bar. He asked how she was holding up. I told him we were separating finances and probably heading different directions. He looked confused and said he thought I already knew everything. I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't need to. A week later, she came home furious, said someone at work had crossed a line and spread personal business. She didn't name him, but she didn't have to. She said it made her look irresponsible, that it hurt her chances for a promotion she'd been counting on. She blamed stress. She blamed timing. She blamed me for creating instability. What she didn't blame was the year of decisions that led there. Her loan payments fell behind next. Then the balance transfer promo expired. The interest hit hard. I watched her open her banking app one night and just stare at the screen without scrolling. She asked if we could at least keep the joint account open for convenience. I said no. She asked if I could co-sign a consolidation loan so she could breathe. I said no again. I stayed calm the entire time. No speeches, no reminders, just refusals. Eventually, the apartment stopped feeling shared, not because I pushed her out, but because she couldn't afford to pretend things were stable anymore. She started staying with friends more, then longer. then almost full-time. One night she came by to get the rest of her things. No drama, no tears, just boxes and silence. Before she left, she said she never thought I'd be the kind of guy who would just let things fall apart. I told her I didn't let anything fall apart. I just stopped holding it together by myself. After she moved out, the noise stopped. No more calls. No more letters with my name accidentally listed. No more tension disguised as partnership. I closed the joint account a month later once the final utilities cleared. I changed nothing else. I heard through mutual friends that she moved again, then again, that she switched apartments, that the coworker stopped helping once the payments didn't come back fast enough. I didn't check. I didn't ask. The last message I ever got from her was short. She said she hoped I was happy. I didn't reply. And for the first time in a long while, the numbers on my screen made sense again.